Amanda, Ron. Look at all these great people who are here. Dom. We have some new names here. All right. People will be straggling in, as people do, but let's get started. Good evening, everybody. As you probably know, it's 1 p.m. on Thursday in Pago Pago, and that could only mean one thing. It's time for yet another episode of The Yard. In addition to those of you joining us on our Zoom channel, we are simultaneously being seen on Facebook Live, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Instagram, I believe. And soon we will be seen on hundreds of thousands of tablets that are in hundreds of jails and prisons from coast to coast. So our brothers and sisters who are doing time will be having a chance to join us on the yard as well. We can't wait for that. The Yard is a production of Commissary Club. Commissary Club is the first social network for 70 million Americans with a criminal record. And while we have not officially launched Commissary Club, it is available on the App Store for iOS and Android. And if you'd like, you can download it. It's free. And when you download it and check it out, you'll discover lots of stuff that's going on with it. If you feel inspired, please give us the very best rating that you can possibly give. We'd appreciate it. My name is Richard Bronson. I am the founder and CEO of Commissary Club, which is the first social network for folks with records, as well as 70 Million Jobs, which is the national employment platform for people with records. Normally, I'd be joined by my partners in crime, number one, and teammates. Number one, NBA legend Seth Sundberg. Seth, prior to playing on the LA Lakers, he also went to school at University of Hawaii, where he set a record for the most consecutive free throws made. So we're expecting to hear news of Seth being voted into the Hall of Fame any day now. So just keep your fingers crossed. Along with Seth, normally we would have Divine, who is a rapper extraordinaire and noted entrepreneur. But tonight I felt like, I'm gonna be selfish and have the opportunity to spend time, just myself and my dear friend who I'll be introducing shortly, who's totally amazing. We're also, of course, joined by the fabulous and very competent Adrian Hatter, who works behind the scenes, keeping the trains running. Thank you so much for everything you do, Adrian. A few housekeeping items, and then I'll introduce our amazing guest. We have so much going on with Commissary Club and 70 Million Jobs. We were a company that was focused entirely on employment, which were 70 million jobs. We have a job board, we have a staffing business. But then when the coronavirus hit, companies laid off all our people, stopped hiring. And for a year and a half, that business suffered terribly. So we used that time to build out the thing that our users, folks with records said that was the second item on their wish list after employment, and that was community. So that's what's behind Commissary Club and what we're hoping to achieve. So that is what we're hoping to achieve on the Yard as well. We've announced that we have a partnership with Rock Nation and Meek Mill and his record label Dream Chasers. Meek is very eager to have folks in our community, both in and out of prison, to, if they're interested, to give him lyrics that he can use in upcoming songs on his albums. And Rock Nation is very eager to, if they can, identify great talent in prison and out to sign for their label. So lots of our people obviously have an interest in the music business, and we think that's pretty cool. Our goal here tonight is to, as much as possible, sort of give people who haven't been to prison an opportunity to get a sense of what the experience is all about. And everyone who goes to prison has a different experience, including the woman that I'll be introducing in a moment. You know, depending on the length of the sentence, depending on the security level of the facility they're in, depending if it's state or federal, you know, all of these things, you know, will impact the experience. So no, you know, rarely do two people have the same experience. So that's why, you know, we can have many, many guests and they all share different things based upon their experience. What we try to do here in general is to focus mostly on that in-prison experience. While, you know, it may be very interesting to hear about someone's life pre-incarceration or post-incarceration, you know, our sort of approach is let's pay attention to that time that they're in prison. You know, in tonight's case, the woman that we're going to be bringing on is involved with so much and has so much going on that we definitely have to talk about what she's up to now or what she's been involved with since she's been out. But initially, we're going to focus on prison. So if you got questions or comments, try to focus them, you know, on the time, you know, in prison again. And by all means, please, as most of you know, type in your comments using the chat feature on the bottom of the screen. If you have questions, enter them there. If you have if someone from the audience wants to join the conversation because they feel like they've got some interesting or insightful things to share, please just let Adrian know and we'll see if we can work that out. What I try to do, you know, my key takeaway when I was in prison was that prison is not filled with a bunch of evil, bad people. More, it is the case that they're just people who screwed up somewhere along the line in ways that almost anybody could, but these people were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, you know, I try to sort of create scenarios or describe scenarios to sort of bring that home. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and we do it every week, and if you haven't been here before, just please trust me and go along with this. Please, everybody, just sort of shut your eyes right now and very slowly take a deep breath, close your eyes and let the air out slowly so you can give your mind just a little bit of space and hopefully your imagination can roam freely for a few moments. In our prisons right now, there are about 15% of the population are women. And that's true of girls who are in juvenile facilities. Many of them are there for drug-related offenses. I mean, in fact, women rarely are ever engaged in really violent crimes. That's something that they leave for the men. Now, I have heard so many times through my work the same sort of story, basically, over and over and over. And it involves a woman telling her story when she was young. Very often, the woman is a mother, and she's got a boyfriend or a husband who maybe is involved with the drug trade. Now, the woman, maybe she knows this, maybe she chooses to ignore it, maybe she should know it, but she doesn't, I don't know. But, you know, she's obviously together with her boyfriend or husband a lot. They drive around a lot. And inevitably, the boyfriend will ask her to do him a favor. Like, hey, take this package and and just drop it off at that house over there. or just wait here and I'll be right back. And maybe, she should know better. She should know what she's doing or what she's being asked to do. But, she's young. Maybe she's a little naive. She wants to please her boyfriend, so she goes along with the request. It doesn't seem to be that difficult or unreasonable. Except on one occasion, the police, they were expecting this delivery. And in fact, they had their eyes on her boyfriend for a while. So when she gets out of the car with a package that she's supposed to just drop off at this other house, the police apprehend her. She has no idea what's in the package. Maybe she has an idea a little bit, but she doesn't really know. She has no idea how much is in there. But nonetheless, she's handcuffed. She's taken to a police station. She's strip searched. She's taken into a small room with a couple of detectives. And they tell her that there were 2 kilos of heroin in that package and that she's facing a sentence of 30 years for transporting the drugs. 30 years. Now, one of the cops, believe it or not, police actually do the good cop, bad cop routine. They did that with me. They continue to do that routine. The nice cop in her case tells her, listen, the judge is going to throw the book at you if he thinks that you're trying to fight this case in court. So listen, I'm really advising you as a friend, admit you were involved, blame it on your boyfriend, and just cop a plea. It's not going to be good, but it could be a lot worse. So she doesn't have the presence of mind to ask for an attorney. She's intimidated naturally. And even if she did ask for an attorney, she'd probably end up with some court-appointed public defender who has 100 other current cases and has no time at all to really dig into her case. And this court-appointed public defender is going to advise her, cop a plea, hope for the best. Now, never mind she's never been in trouble before. Never mind that she has no idea what was in the package. Never mind that she's got kids who are depending on her. And never mind that she had, in no way was she going to benefit in any way by the sale of these drugs. She wasn't going to get a penny for any of this. At the same time, there's an assistant district attorney who's prosecuting the case. He is an ambitious guy. He has his eyes on moving up in his career, and he's going to make sure he's being seen as being tough on crime, tough on drug dealers. And he tells her through her attorney that if she doesn't accept the plea deal, he's going for a 30-year sentence, a 30-year sentence. This poor woman is wondering if she'll ever see her kids again. So of course she takes the deal. Now everybody's happy. The cops are happy. They got the conviction. The DA's happy. It's a win. The public defender can cross off her case from his docket, not one less case to worry about. But for this first-time offender, things aren't so good because she's not going to watch her baby's first steps. She's not going to watch her kid appear in a school play. She's not going to watch her kid graduate from high school, maybe. She's going to hear, however, how her kids have been put into a group home where they're being picked on and beaten up. That's what lies ahead for her. She's a first-time offender whose only crime was being a good girlfriend. Naive, yes. Stupid, yes. But 10 years stupid? That's how so many girls and so many women that I've come across have ended up as statistics with the best years of their lives stripped away by the system. So please now open your eyes. And now join me again for This Week on the Yard, so we can meet someone whose response to all that I described is, not on my watch. Mm-hmm. She's a woman who's gotten herself who herself was involved in the drug trade, originally through her boyfriend. She saw firsthand how badly girls and young women are screwed over by the criminal justice system. And when she came out of prison, she remade herself into a veritable force of nature. What do I mean by that? Here's a short list of what she's been up to. Right now, she's the founder and executive director of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. She's delivered a TEDx talk. She has advised the US Senate on the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act. She's a justice scholar and fellow at Columbia University. She was one of just 8 people John Legend chose to be part of his Unlocked Futures initiative. And she hosts a radio show on Sirius XM called Last Mile, Second Chances. And because of all this, every celebrity that gets involved in criminal justice wants to be her BFF. So perhaps you can understand why we are so excited to have this total OG badass join us on the yard. Welcome to Topeka Sam to the yard. Topeka, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm laughing, Richard, but I'm like, that has got to be the best introduction I've ever received in my life.
Not too much?
It was the OG badass for me. But thank you so much for having me here. I wouldn't want to be any other place today.
Well, thank you. And when Topeka says she'd rather be anywhere else,
I would not.
She would not be able. Well, but where she is right now, she's in Las Vegas, and she could be watching Celine Dion perform, or Britney. She could be watching White Leopards do their thing, but instead she's chosen to be with us. So we're really, really happy for this. Now, before we get going, I have to do this. You're going to hate me again.
Oh, Lord.
Good Lord. Where is this going, you're wondering? No. I asked you this question. We had lunch a couple of weeks ago, and I had to ask. I just needed to get the 800-pound gorilla in the room off the table, and I'm going to do it again because I promise you lots of people are wondering the same exact thing. Now, Topeka.
Yes.
There is a Dakota Slim. There's a Tennessee Jed. There's even a South Side Johnny. So please tell everyone, because they're all wondering this, where did the name Topeka Sam come from?
Well, Sam is my given name, which is Caribbean and African descent. So Ghana on one side, Trinidad on another, my father's side. And Topeka, it's 2 stories that my parents have told. One was my father, when he was in the service, he went through Topeka, Kansas, and the name just stuck in his head. The other was the case, the Board of Education versus the Topeka, Kansas versus the Board of Education. And so my mother always said that, and I went with that one, Topeka, because it sounded powerful, and she thought the name would be powerful and that I would be powerful one day. And so that's what I go with, that story. The other one seems pretty boring to me.
Okay, so 2 questions. Number 1, what do your friends call you?
Oh, they call me Topeka, they call me Topi, they call me Pika, they call me T. That's about it.
Oh, well, that's enough.
Yeah.
All right. Do you feel, given what your mother, in choosing this name, and what you understand your mother's motivation, have you felt from a very young age that you had a responsibility, a destiny to ultimately fulfill, to do something great?
Absolutely, I did. And not only did everyone that I met would always tell me that, whether I was a child and they were like, oh my God, you have such a personality, you're going to be something special, or you're going to run the world, or you're going to do this or that. And we go on our journeys and we don't believe those things about ourselves, which is why we land in certain places that we do, until I did. And so I think that I am, based on what my mother said, now I am living out that power.
Okay, that's great. You are, and have every reason to be so proud for fulfilling your destiny.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, you and I, we talked about our childhoods, and we both came from middle class, upper middle class sort of upbringings, nice families.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad was a successful businessman, mine was too, and my family never expected me that I was going to end up in prison, and your parents thought the same of you. You were a great student. You excelled at everything you did.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to kind of imagine when that moment, because I remember it distinctly for myself, when I sort of crossed the threshold and took that step, whereas before I take the step, I'm in the free world, and now I'm taking the step, and now I'm in prison. Do you remember that moment? Was it that
Yeah,
significant for you?
yeah, yeah, it was. I think, I had those moments, it wasn't like I was arrested and that was the first time I was arrested. When I went to prison, it was actually the third time I had been arrested. But the time that I knew that it was serious and that I likely wasn't going to be able to pay my way out, talk my way out, hire the best attorney my way out. I knew that last time.
Okay. And what was your first impression when you made that step into prison where you knew you were going to be there for a while?
Well, after I was arrested and I was arraigned, first when I got in, you're arrested and you're taken back and you're held. I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead, pay bail, get out of here, because I didn't have any kind of history that would lean to me needing to be detained. And I got to court and my family was there, my friends was there, people had money and deeds to houses. They're like, whatever it takes, we're getting you out. And the judge was like, you're a drug queen pin, a threat to society, no bail. And when I went back into the holding cell at that point, after the arraignment, and I went into the cell, I knew at that time, okay, well, now shit is real. And I can no longer isolate, even for the few hours that I was there, people that I was close to, they were like, you're not like those people. Don't talk to them, don't get familiar. We're going to get you out of here. And so once I went back and I realized, well, I am going to be here for a while, I need to begin to just, first ground myself and figure out like the why, right? And I began to immediately pray. I mean, I was raised in the church. I knew who God was. I lost my way, but most of us do. I got there and I got on my knees and I remember the person coming around with books and I asked for a Bible. And when I opened the Bible, the first chapter I opened to was Romans 8. And my eyes went to Romans 8:28. And it was in all things, God will do good for those who love God, who are called according to their purpose. And I was like, all right, God, well, this is something that you want to, share to me. And I began to get different books. And this scripture was the theme in every single book I read. So I was like, all right, well.
Wait. So let me understand this. The Bible said to you, or you read the Bible, and it said there, essentially, to paraphrase, what you're going through, there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that God put you in this position for a good reason. And, you got to discover what it is, but have faith that there's a plan here. Is that how you sort of interpreted
I would
that?
say that's the paraphrase, yes. I mean, as I studied and I learned later, we have free will. And so, when you understand the paths of right and wrong or good and bad or, great and evil or these things, that we ultimately have a choice, which is free will. And that's what we are granted. However, depending on whatever that choice is, I am a believer that, our lives are written. And ultimately, whichever road that I took at whatever time that I was taking, ultimately, I would have went exactly in the path that I went. And so for that, I wouldn't change anything.
Okay, I normally wouldn't do this, but I don't worry. I really don't talk about how people ended up in prison, but your story was really interesting, and it had a lot to do with men or a man, and that you discovered I'm a lot smarter than this guy, and a better businesswoman than this guy, and I could do a lot better. You got involved with drug dealing through a boyfriend, and you were introducing him to people that you met who were impressed with you, and they trusted him because they trusted you, and at a certain point he sort of let you down and you said, screw this, I can do this better. I mean, that's fair, right? that
That's
characterization?
a good paraphrase. Yeah, that's a good paraphrase.
And you were a very successful drug dealer in your heyday, right?
I would say businesswoman.
Businesswoman,
Yeah, I
entrepreneur.
wouldn't necessarily say that. Yeah, I would say businesswoman. Yeah, I
Okay,
had
but
a commodity. I was
they
selling a
called,
commodity at the time.
they called you like a drug queen or something, didn't they?
They did, but honestly, when I look at it, I was really a broker. That's the way I look at it. I look at it as a broker.
Commodities
I
broker.
connected people to things, and that's just what it was. And that thing happened to be, unfortunately, it was drugs.
Right.
And so that's what I did. Yes.
Okay. So ultimately, you had run-ins with the law. You were able to get yourself out because you could afford, or your family could afford, good lawyers. They remained very, very supportive of you and loving, and they
Mhm.
were there for you. Why, you shared this with me, but it was so interesting to me. Why did you feel when you had like opportunity to have success in more traditional and more legal sort of realms, why did you feel like you had to go this illegal route?
Mhm.
you know
So what I
Yeah.
shared with you was in the beginning, I can talk about in retrospect, right? Like when I got to Baltimore, Maryland, it was a complete culture shock for me. I wanted to get to, I went to college. I wanted to go to an HBCU. So I chose Morgan State University in Baltimore. Being raised in Manorville, Long Island, the only Black family in my neighborhood, it was very different. And so I chose an HBCU because I wanted to be around kids that looked like me. I get to Baltimore, and though excited because now I'm in a city, I'm away from my parents who were, fairly strict, and I was sheltered, then now I'm like on my own. Even in that, I was feeling that I wasn't being accepted, if you will. So it was a lot of, in this new community that I believe I'm a part of, it was a lot of, you talk like you're white, or you think you're better than us, or you're pretty to be dark skinned. And it was all of these things that I remember calling my mom and asking her, like, what does this mean? I don't understand, and all these things. And so as I began to kind of just like navigate and find my way, I began to hang out in Baltimore City. And so now I'm hanging out in the city off of campus, and I'm learning more about what's going on in the city. And, of course, now I'm becoming attracted to what that was, because it was completely different than when I was raised in the suburbs. And so in that, I'm dating guys. And so my parents had a place in Harlem, though I was raised in Long Island. And so I'm repping Harlem,
Like I
right?
was.
I'm from Harlem. And so guys are doing things in front of me because they think I'm a city girl and I know what's up. And so meanwhile, I'm green as the grass is green. And so I'm basically just like, faking the funk. And they're doing things. I'm looking at things. I'm learning, really. I'm learning, I guess, vocabulary. I'm learning how to fit in. And I realized, again, in retrospect, that I was buying into this false narrative of what Blackness was. And so, in order for me to feel as if I was being accepted, I began to go down the trajectory of this road. And though also understanding now that really people were around me, because even some of my friends that were from in college and things, they would be like, you had everything. We didn't understand why you were that way. So they were attracted to me for everything that I was, and I was attracted to them because of everything that they were. So it's interesting when you grow up and you really understand that.
That's such a fascinating, like, sociological phenomenon. This like identity kind of displacement or uncertainty. I mean, we tend to look at things so black and white. I was about to say, in a linear fashion. White people are white people, black people are black people, but within any there are subgenres that are in turmoil very often, particularly when you're a young kid trying to find his or her way, you discovering who you were as a black woman. I mean, that was a path, that was a process, right?
And I would say, I mean, of course, I always knew I was a black woman, even in being growing up around all white people. The issue, I think, was that or not even issue. I think that the learning curve or the understanding for me now in my adult life is that, when you understand the dynamic of racism and you understand the dynamics of colorism and you understand the dynamics of those things and how that then actually interprets within community. So if I think about, and even in my studies, think about how slavery was and how people had to fight to either be in the house versus the field, who would be raped more versus who would be raped less. And often if you were lighter skin or fairer skin, you were able to get in the house, or it deemed as if you were, of mixed race. And that was looked at as something that was better. And so people who are darker skin or darker complexion have, even today, have to navigate things very, very differently in, I would say white America. And so even within our communities and communities of colors, it's that same dynamic, unfortunately. And we don't talk about it often. And so for me, I do understand and realize that most part of me was just that identity. And even in, I think I also expressed to you that even in coming into this work at post incarceration and the things that I learned in movement building and organizing, and the fact that people may not understand why I am the way I am and why I operate in the way that I do and why I show up in the way that I show up. It's all a part of everything that I am. And the great opportunities that I've been afforded, and being able to be in Long Island, but also in Baltimore City or in Harlem or in the Bronx or wherever, and being able to navigate all those different areas allows me to be able to relate with so many different types of people. So now it's a gift to be able to see the world through a different lens than many people who haven't had that experience.
As you're describing this, I'm sure you and probably everybody who's done time, you're inevitably asked by lots of people, do you regret? What would you do over? What do you look at with these mistakes and whatever? And sure, I regret hurting people. I regret treating people with disrespect. But I also look upon everything I went through as being elemental and critical to who I am today and the work I do today and my mission today and my reason for being today. And that if I hadn't gone through all this, I never would have discovered this. And it was tough lessons to learn, but but they were learned. And I'm listening to you, and it's sort of like you had to go through all of this to come out of it to do what you do now. Is that true?
It is. I have no regrets. I don't. Who I was at whatever period of my life I was who I was. Whether
Right.
informed or not informed. And so I have no regrets. I ask God for forgiveness for some of the harms that I may have caused and that I have caused, whether it was to people known or unknown. And I've also asked God to forgive those who've harmed me,
Right.
based whether they've known or have not known. But ultimately, I've never beat myself up and wish that things would have been different. I'm grateful for every lived experience that I have. I utilize each of those experiences in order to inform who I am today. And without them, I wouldn't be able to be who I am and embody all of those things. So I'm happy about every experience. I didn't like them all, let's be clear. But I am grateful, for each and every one of them.
Okay. So thank you for sharing all that. When people ask me, it's not easy for me to answer. So thank you for being so forthcoming and honest and, who you are. So you're coming into prison. Did you feel initially sort of a challenge as to who you were as a Black woman coming into prison? Initially, it's going to be a kind of a tense, challenging environment, if there ever was one. Did you have a strong identity that you were going to walk in with, or was that not an issue for you?
No, I don't think so. Remember, like I got arrested, I didn't get a bail, and I immediately went into the county jail. And so, I was in a cell separately because I was a Fed detainee. And so I was away from everyone else who was in the, from the county. It was Virginia.
That was a blessing.
Well, yes, it wasn't a curse though, right? Because part of it was that when you are looked at as someone coming from the feds, that people who are in the county jail look at you differently, right? Like automatically you come with this idea of being high level, automatic and better, right? And so people don't necessarily understand how to communicate with you, or when they do, they attack, in ways because of just how they're feeling.
What did you go through that? In fact,
in the very, and maybe I think in the first maybe week, because I was really isolating. I was in the cell 18 to 21 hours a day, and the times that we were able to come out was to eat, to take a shower, and to talk on the phone. And so I may have come out for 2 hours out of the time I was able, which was to take a shower, call whoever I needed to call. And then I would go back and I would just read and write and, that type of thing. And so ultimately, when, I got the epiphany that I'm like, okay, you need to become a part of this community that you are now in, is when I just, I would sit on the side and kind of watch. I didn't play cards. I didn't know how to play spades or anything like that. And that's really what people did to take up their time. I end up like, I'm not going to do this. So I got a job, the only job, which was the tier worker job. You got paid $10 a week. And so people were mad at me because here I come working, right? Yeah, and I didn't realize that it was, people were taking a stand. I just did not, want to be unproductive, because that's what it is. We all know that. And so I remember as I began to go to the NA and AA classes, because you had options to go to GED classes. I didn't need that. Go to computer classes. I began to teach those. Go to NAAA or religious classes. And I did that. And so as I began to go and I began to listen to the stories that the sisters told, is when they began to open up, because I was asking questions, because I wanted to know why, they ended up in the way that they did by drug use, because I didn't use drugs.
They were open to answering your questions and letting down. Hey, I just want to reset the room quickly. We are here with Topeka Sam, who is a prominent advocate in criminal justice reform, an amazing woman. But I'd be remiss if I didn't share in celebration of our friend Pinky Stanseski, who is joining us tonight, as Pinky does, I think every week. And it's Pinky's birthday. So, or it just was Pinky's birthday. So happy birthday to Pinky. Pinky posted apparently a link to his cake, which, is second best to actually eating it. So thank you for that. Many, many more, Pinky, and hopefully we can share many more birthdays together on the yard. Jane, who also is a frequent guest of ours, wrote something really beautiful that I'd like to share. She, in listening to you, Topeka, she wrote, "Forgiveness and gratefulness is a thread running through these conversations. Topeka Sam communicates these with grace and gentleness towards herself and others, a safe person and place for everyone." So that's what people are saying about you, Topeka. I thought that was really nice.
Well, thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Pinky, for being born. All right, so you leave the county jail, which is typically a crazy, people are there, they're gone. People aren't really looking, society hasn't been created in county jails. People are often violent. But you go from county jail into prison. And prison, in certain respects is a lot better than county jail, because you have people who are there for a long time and who have to lead their life there, and they can't live in chaos every day. So certain societal rules apply, et cetera, et cetera. Did you at any point coming into prison fear physically for yourself?
I laugh because when I got to, as everyone who ever has been in the federal system knows, the federal transfer center in Oklahoma.
Oy.
Right. It was disgusting. And oh
How
my
long did it
God.
take you to get to where you were going?
It was,
Explain that to people.
oh, okay. So after being sentenced and taken from the court, I went to Warsaw, which anybody who's ever been through there was disgusting. And so from Warsaw, then you're handcuffed and shackled and put onto this van and taken hours to where then for me was an airlift in Pennsylvania. And I remember being at this airlift, and the scene is just so vivid to me. We're standing out there on, outside. There's rows of men and women, rows, and they have these sheriffs or U.S. Marshals, and they're pointing their rifles at you. And I remember seeing the men, and I mean handsome, gorgeous men. And I remember seeing them in these paper suits and these little paper shoes. And you could see their boxes through it, and their heads were like down. And I was like, wow, like to see how just this experience is like breaking people, like it's just designed that way. And then to get on to the plane, which as we all know, they call Con Air. We get on the plane and still handcuffed and shackled. And I was black box. And mind you, I'm like, okay, like, you see a guy and a thing across his face. I'm like, they're just doing way too much. But I'm there, and I'll never forget, I had to go to the bathroom. I was on my cycle and I needed to go to the bathroom. And the women are in the front of the plane, like first class would sit, and all the men are on the back. And I remember going through with my hands and everything shackled. I'm moving through, and like men were, hooping and hollering. I actually still they transferred me in like street clothes. So they're what I was arrested in. And they're like, talking and saying all the stuff and touching me. And I'm like, and the guard is yelling at me for being touched. And I get to the bathroom and I have these tight jeans on. And so they won't undo my anything. And I'm trying to pull my pants down to go to the restroom and get all myself together, and then trying to pull it up. And then they try to push in the door, telling me I better hurry up. So now I'm yelling, right? Because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm trying to pull my pants up. They bring a woman in there to force my pants up. I go back, and I had this moment of, like, I wanted to hit the guys for touching on me and groping on me. And then there was a part of me that felt bad. It was like, I might have been the only woman that they've touched in 20 years. Like, that was the thought that came across my mind. And so I didn't even argue. I just let them, So it was just like, maybe this will be the only action that they get. Let me just go ahead and just make it to the front of the plane. And as I can giggle about it now, and I don't really know what kind of state of mind I was in then. But fast forward, we get off the plane, and when you see the years ago, the movies, when they talk about how slaves are auctioned off, this is what it reminded me of, because we're all chained and shackled to one another. We get to the Oklahoma Transfer Center. We have to step up on that block in order for them to come and they're below you, taking off your shackles. And then going back where you take your clothes, and then you're like, if you want to get your clothes sent home, it's going to take like 7 hours to process you. If you go ahead and let them take the clothes and throw them away, you can go right back. So of course, after this experience, you're like, take the damn clothes. I don't care. I don't want them. I don't need them. And then, of course, the dehumanization of the coughing, the squatting, the touching and those things. And I remember the woman who was actually guarding me told me she needed me to open myself up so she can see. And I was like, no, like, why do you want me to do that? I'm not doing that. And she was like, because I have to see if you have any piercings. I was like, whether or not I have them, because I've been incarcerated for the last 11 months. You see what my file is, and no other officer has asked me to do that, and I'm not doing it. Well, if you don't do it, I'm going to stick you in the hole. I'm like, well, I'm already in prison. Where else are you going to stick me? Right. But to see like just the way that these officers, even in that moment, were doing, ultimately I get there and I'm like, all right, like how is the rest of this journey going to be? So now I'm in the cell And the cell is freezing cold, as you know. This is all leading up to my fear, right? The cell is freezing cold. I remember laying on the bed because I had the top bunk. You know, obviously I
Did
didn't
you
have any
meet
problems.
Sally at this point? Have you met your Sally?
I met her, yes. Yes, when I get in the cell, she's there. And she's on the
Okay.
bottom bunk. Beautiful woman from Alabama, as a matter of fact. And she reached out to me recently on social media. And I'm on the top of the bunk, and I remember, because it was freezing cold in the transfer center, seeing all these like paper spitballs on the vent where people were throwing wet paper to get it to stick because it's so cold, to try to block the vent. And I remember, you know, hearing through the toilet, it was like people yelling, like you could hear it echo. And I was asking her, like, what is that? She's like, it's the guys below us. They're trying to talk to us. And they're having all these conversations through the toilet. And I'm like, in my head, like, what in the whole fuck is going on? You know, because they didn't do this to the other place. And I remember the next day we get in, and Mr. Sparks, I think his name was, the officer there. He was, I was like, at this point, I'm completely like shit scared. Like, I don't even know what's happening. Like, I don't even know what's going on. And I met a sister. It was two. One sister who told me, you know, like, look, you don't need to be scared. You're going to find your kind. This is what she said. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? She was like, if you want to be a church lady, you'll find your kind. If you want to be, what she said was bulldagging, you'll find your kind.
Bulldagging?
Yes, what she
What's
used.
that mean?
Being in a relationship with a woman, you know, that's what, this is her language. You'll find your kind. If you want to be, you know, the teacher's pet, they'll be that. Like she was telling me. So basically, it's nothing to be in fear. You will get in where you fit in. And then the next day, I was like kind of walking around the little area where you could go outside, but not outside. And Missy Trigg was there. Anybody who knows Missy Trigg. And we were talking, and we went.
Tell everybody who Missy Trigg is.
So Missy Trigg is a sister who had been incarcerated over 15 years, I believe. First time nonviolent, was incarcerated because her boyfriend had set her up. There was, you know, Amy Povad did a lot of campaigning work around getting her, you know, her profile up. I did time with her, and she is home and doing well and beautiful and lives in, I believe, Missouri. But Missy, she was also a fitness person and had been in prison for a very long time. And when they were designating us, I found out that I was going to the camp, and so was she. We were the only two going to the camp, Danbury. And so she was like, look, just stay with me. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. I'm going to show you the ropes. And she did. And so she was the one who actually really helped me starting my journey, and gave me a lot of peace in just what it was that I needed to do, how to navigate as I got to Danbury. So I was scared until I met Missy. Let me say that.
Okay. I had it wasn't someone named Missy, unfortunately, but some guy came over and sort of set me straight. And at first I was very suspicious of, you know, what's his angle, but it turned out he was just being a human being to me. Mm-hmm. Did you feel, when you were talking about the guards and how they treated you and what they had to do, you know, you were talking about how you felt in a weird way sort of compassion for the guys on the plane who were treating you disrespectfully. Did you feel for the guards a sort of similar feeling, like, you know, you're going to be leaving, whether it's 3 years or 10 years, you're getting out of here. But for these people, these guards, this is their life. And they live in some little town, and they're not making much money. And, you know, they're watching people come and go, and they're the ones who have to ask you to do all of these dehumanizing things. Did you ever feel like, you know, in a way, maybe they're more of a prisoner than you are in all this? I sort of felt a little compassion for them.
No, and absolutely not. And I'll say why. One, there were guards who were very compassionate on my journey, right? Because they were there. This was a small town. This was the great job in the town and the opportunity for them. And they looked at it like that. They understood that the people who were there were down on their luck, which is sometimes what some of them said, whether right, wrong, or indifferent. And they were there to do a job. And it wasn't to make people feel worse than they were, number one. Number two, The reason why I didn't feel, and I still don't feel bad for their jobs is because, as I said originally, we have free will and we have choices. When people work in correctional facilities, that's a choice. Like they're choosing to be an officer. And when they are overwhelmed, they can choose to take vacation, right? They have benefits. They can choose to get mental health treatment. The same things that they suggest we choose to do, they should choose to. And so if you are deciding to work overtime and be in darkness and perpetuate the same violence against people because of the system that you're in, then no, I don't feel sorry to that because that is your choice.
Okay, that's fair. You're there. I'm really, the one thing that I can't, obviously, as a man, relate to any more than you as a woman could relate to the male experience in prison, because you've never gone through that. But I mean, I've heard very interesting stories from different women who've done time, and some described environments where there were these like families created, where there'd be a mother and a father essentially, and there'd be kids. Of course, they'd all be women who were in this prison, and they were families sort of looking after each other. I heard about situations that were violent. You were in a camp, so my guess is there wasn't much of that that you had to address. But from a socializing point of view, I mean, how would you describe it? What was it like?
All right. Like, say that again. What you mean by socializing? Help me understand. Say a little more.
Okay, well, that was sort of unfair. I threw a lot in there.
Mm.
What surprised you based upon your expectations about being in prison? Number one.
Okay, the first thing that surprised me was that people had sins, good sins. That, I was used to seeing cops and all these shows on TV where you see people banging on cell doors and, cussing guards out and fighting and acting crazy. And that is none of the experience that I had. I had women who were mothers, who were daughters, who were grandmothers, who were aunts, who were sisters, who were friends, who were beautiful, who were brilliant. And so that narrative that was out there as to the why it completely took me aback. That there were more people that came from even the same upbringing as I did than not. And, there were more people, unfortunately, who were being criminalized for substance misuse, sexual trauma and violence than there should have been. And
Okay.
so that, I would say, is what surprised me.
So one thing that I'm very eager to learn about and hear you speak about is the difference between what a woman or a girl in juvenile facility versus a man, what they go through, and what are the particular challenges, that a woman goes through, and does that make the experience much worse than what men go through? Who has it worse in prison, men or women, do you think?
Well, from what I hear brothers say, and I'll just say that, they will say, I had no idea that women went through the things that they went through. And it seems as if you all are going through an awful lot, right?
Like, what sort of things do women go through?
Well, one, abuse from the guards that
Did
they
you
like
go
to
through
say
that?
are relationships. I did not, thank
Did you
God I
see
did
it?
not. I'm sorry.
Did you see it going on?
I did what I did. Yes. So let me say why I'll say yes. I saw guards being very extra. I'll just say two sisters inside doing extra favors, calling people out of different areas, being in offices a long time and things like that. And the reason why I say that to me is abuse is that no woman can actually consent to a relationship by a guard, period. Whether she believes she can or not, it is the guard's responsibility to know better than that. And so that's why I would categorize that as abuse. One.
Are these male guards or also women guards?
It's both. It's both.
Oh.
It's both. It's people taking advantage of people who are who are being oppressed, period. So,
Okay.
that's just what it is.
So
The second thing.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You said to be clear.
You're referring to what you gather is guards sort of exchanging, better treatment for sexual favors? I mean, to be very graphic about this.
Yeah, sexual favors, just company or companionship, because to your point, officers are in there all day, right? So either they're having relationships with other officers or they're finding ways to have relationships with sisters who are incarcerated. So it's either or. And so for me, that is unacceptable. Just like it is unacceptable to have a relationship with someone who is your subordinate, in corporate America, in a job, it is also unacceptable for someone to be sexualized in prison because they are still your subordinate, even however you want to look at it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Like that's a common sense, It's just like
absolutely. So that is one way, certainly, that women, a challenge that women will face that generally men are not going to face in prison. What else does a woman have to go through?
Women are the majority are primary caregivers of dependent children. And so when you have 85% or more than 85% of all women who have been incarcerated are the primary caregiver of a dependent child, means that children are stripped away from their mothers. They then sometimes go into other systems such as foster care or, and become, again, traumatized, violated, and other levels of abuse. And so that is the other thing that women have to worry about that, men often don't, because when men leave, they leave their women. And often they leave their women with children. So that's the other thing.
I don't recall when we talked, did you have kids while you were in prison?
No, I didn't birth any children, but I have six. Well, now it's six, but then it was 5 nieces and nephews, whom all I have a great relationship. But my niece, my oldest niece, I was really like the mother figure in her life. My brother had sole custody of her, raised her. And so between myself and my mother, we were the ones who she looked up to as her women figures. And so, though she came to visit me when I was incarcerated, my brother made sure of that. But so I mean, I'm very close to my family. And so, motherhood looks different for everyone.
Yeah, and you were deprived of that and they were deprived of you. What is is there an answer, on the assumption that you accept the fact that if someone breaks the law, they should be punished, which is a whole other conversation, and what law are they breaking and are they being treated equally and everything else? But if in fact they've done something wrong, is there some way to address, the separation, which is as maybe even more devastating for the kid than it is for the mother in a situation like this? What could be done differently?
Well, first of all, I feel like, we punish ourselves, right? Society punishes us in different ways. So I don't think that when you're going through the legal system and you have to go through these things, that incarceration is the solution. So I don't believe that. I believe that there are alternatives to incarceration. Do I believe that people needed to time out sometimes? Yes. Do I believe timeouts look like prison? No. Do I feel that darkness begets darkness? Yes. So if you put a person in a cage, what do you expect to happen? If you put even in a camp cage, what do you expect to happen? How do you think people are going to respond? I mean, even they treat the puppies in the puppy program better than they treat the people. So I think that it is critical for us to look at these alternatives to incarceration, which are like community-based organizations, which are giving people, mental health support, substance misuse support, sexual trauma and violence support, resources in community, opening opportunities to pathways of equity, jobs, safe and affordable housing, food, healthy, like all of the things. And when you are looking at systems and why people break the law sometimes. Now, I explain why I did the things I did. So this is about my work, not about me, this statement that I'm making. But when you look at the majority of people who've gone through a trajectory that land them in prison, then for me, it's who do you truly blame? Can I blame the mother who stole Pampers in order to put Pampers on her baby? Do I blame her for stealing formula because she can no longer produce milk and so she has to get it and doesn't have money? because her stamps went out, or whatever the case? Do I blame the woman who stole because she has a substance misuse problem and she's trying to feed a need? No, I don't. I need to blame the system that's not giving her the resources to heal. Like, so if we think about who is really the criminal in all of this, to me, it's these systems that are consistently perpetuating violence against people. And if we want a community that's healthier, that is safer, then we have to reinvest dollars into the community to get to the people. Like, that's just period. I feel like, I always say, common sense is common sense. My mother says common sense is not that common. So, my mother is a wise woman. It says a lot of wise things.
We do a lot of research, and actually Adrienne, who is your #1 fan.
Yeah, Adrienne is super dope. Shout out to Adrienne.
She's amazing. She's an amazing woman. We've done a lot of research, and we've been blown away by, the state of reentry, that there are literally hundreds of billions of dollars spent on when people are released from prison. And that includes rearresting and trying and reincarcerating them, and all the programs and all the everything that exists. And yet, despite all this money that's spent and all these resources and all these organizations throughout the United States who mean well, nonetheless, the rate of recidivism is about 75%. 3 out of 4 people will return to jail or prison within a couple of years of their release. And they don't return just once, it's like 4 or 5 times on average. The rate of homelessness, the rate of substance abuse, the rate of mental illness that exists among this population, I dare say it would be hard for us to do any worse than the way things are handled now. So when you talk about the resources that should be expended towards the community to sort of short circuit these inevitable outcomes, it's not like we're talking about spending new money or more money. We're likely spending a lot less money to have much better outcomes. And, I recognize that, politically, there's not a lot of political capital that wants to be expended. But nonetheless, what we're doing clearly doesn't work, not even nearly, and so what you're saying, 20 years ago, people would say, why? These people are animals. They don't deserve anything.
Not 20 years ago, though. They say it now.
Well, yeah, but at least there are people like you, like us, and Pinky, and the people in our audience, who through their experience or their, however they've come to understand it, they recognize that approach just doesn't work. Forget about what's right or wrong. It just doesn't work. It's not giving us the value. We're wasting money on medicine that doesn't work. Period.
No, Richard, I mean, it is working. It's working to meet their bottom line, right? The bottom line is the more people that are in prison for them, the more money that's spent on, to your point, these medications that people then become addicted to, illegal substance and now a legal substance. It's all of these things. If you have people that are dependent on a system, that is a system that is privatized through government funding, then they make money. So they're doing everything that they've designed a system to, have free servitude and slave labor. They have designed a system, to keep particular populations oppressed, whether you're very smart, whether you're poor and black, poor and white. All of these things they're doing. We know, right? As you said, but we didn't put the system in the place that it is today.
Oh, no.
And so it's not going to just take us to change this system. And we can get on these platforms and we communicate about these things. We talk to others and we communicate with them. We help to fight laws and pass laws and all those things, which are necessary. But after you pass the laws, where we know money will go into lobbying and go into campaign pushing and go and go and go. But once you release people from prison, where are they going to go?
Exactly.
They come home and they get clemency immediately. Fantastic. If there's no family home for them, then where do they go?
Where do they live if they can't get a home? Where do they work, and how do they support themselves and their family?
They're not released with their ID. Basic stuff. They
Yeah.
can't open a bank account. They can't get a job because they're discriminated against, right? People, the biases of what people think. It doesn't matter. You can have a degree. It doesn't matter. Your conviction trumps any degree. Your race and a conviction trumps any of that. So,
And
you know, it is about, to me, everything is about creating equitable opportunities for yourself and for your community. And that's, I believe, what we do, right? Like, I
okay,
mean,
so when did the epiphany occur for you, or when did it become clear to you that your path in life was to advocate, for this? And, how did that happen? Did it happen after you were released?
mm-mm.
Or was it while you were there observing all of this injustice and
Yes.
saying,
Mhm.
man, this just can't go on. I got to do something about it?
Yeah, it was before I was even sentenced. Like, I knew when I saw the things that I saw in that county jail. And I would see women who were, I actually like witnessed a woman going through withdrawal off of heroin. And, you know, I could smell like all of the things and the violent vomiting and the things that she was going through. And to see sisters go out and come back and go out and come back and then go out. And then you find out they overdosed and they died, right? Because they never got the support that they need. They took them off of the street and threw them in prison and gave them a moment of detox, but that wasn't mental detox. It didn't give them anything to go home to. And so that's why they went right back to doing the same thing. And so it was very easy for me to understand, well, let me say it was very easy once my mind was clear of what I needed to do because of, again, my faith and, my ability to be still and hear really what was God's trajectory for my life. And that I knew I no longer was in charge of my own life and that I needed to be obedient because, not being obedient landed me in prison. And so being obedient would do greater things.
Obedient to God, you mean?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
How was this a slowly evolving awareness,
No.
or did it just sort of hit you like a moment, a flash of understanding?
No, I knew like right away. Like I knew. I mean, I knew even in the midst of me doing all the things, I justified behavior because I wasn't connected in that way, Like I said, I brokered things. So I connected people to people. I never handed drugs to any particular person. So I didn't necessarily understand and see that. I didn't see a certain person, a community, because I looked at myself at a different level. And so when you really realize who you are at a particular time in your life and you become honest with that, like I knew that I was not as great as I thought I was. Once I realized that, and I realized I had to do some really self-reflection and healing and forgiveness, and then grounding, that it was clear for me to understand why I went through and saw everything that I did in order to get on a certain purposeful path, in order to do the work that God has blessed me to be able to do.
I feel like I went through a similar metamorphosis. I always felt I was put on this earth for a reason. And the reason wasn't ripping off other people or causing pain, or hurting other people. And, I feel blessed in my own way that I discovered that. So this is all heavy stuff. Let's talk about, though, you're in prison and it's the sort of day-to-day existence.
Mm-hmm.
Food is terrible in general in prison.
Right.
I think that's a nice way of putting it.
Right.
What, if anything, did you do, or what solutions did you find to sort of get around the food that they were serving you?
Well, I was, again, fortunate enough, no matter where I was, to be able to purchase commissary and or but I guess buy for favors, right? Like, so for example, in the county jail, they allowed us on Friday or Saturday night to be able to order food outside. So we ordered Popeyes, whatever it was you ordered. Of course, it was like a crazy amount. So so like if, for example, the 2-piece of biscuit and a soda, which was maybe the deal. You know how they have the $5 deals at Popeyes? They charge you maybe $15, $20, right? So it was the high, but the fact that every weekend we were able to order for Pizza Hut, Popeyes, Outback Steakhouse, whatever, I was able to do that. So that was what I did on the weekend in the prison in the county. When I got to, and let's say that the fact is that I did not eat the tricolor bologna and the 8 pieces of bread and all the nastiness. So, I was able to keep my girlish figure in shape because I didn't eat much while I was there. When I got to Danbury, they had, I was able to purchase tuna, tuna and stuff like that on commissary. So I did all of that. Mackerel, tuna, the chicken in a pack, all of that. And I had friends that worked in the kitchen. So they would get onions, green peppers, eggs, all kinds of stuff. And I would buy them things on commissary and they would get me stuff from the kitchen. And on the weekend, they would, like I had a friend and she would cook the stuff. So I would buy everything and she would make like these little taco bowls or potato logs or like all kinds of stuff that I was not doing. And so, little noodle stuff, or the sisters would make like, shout out to Tawana, she made these things called triangles and they were really good. And so, we built community, right? Like we shared resources, we did different things and stuff like that. On Thanksgiving, I'll never forget my first Thanksgiving in Danbury. I cried. It was one of the best Thanksgivings I've ever been to in my life, even from home. There was a cornucopia the sisters made. There was everything from vegan greens to greens with meat. It was every kind of dessert, it was just incredible. And I was just like, wow. And part of that also was because of the officer, Mr. Kennel. He was very compassionate and he would order the things that the sisters wanted to make on the holidays. And so we were able to have, it felt really like home. That was Danbury though. When I got to Greenville, it was another one of those ugly trays with, legs the size of somebody's head and all these other things that I didn't do. But I think that, to share that experience is to share that, women, we often, and even I think men, when you build a brotherhood or a sisterhood with people that you are around, and you build community and you share resources, and that becomes your family. And when you have your family and you're building these relationships, you want to see the best for your family. And for me, because, and I'm getting all emotional right now thinking about this, because I was really fortunate to be able to meet commissary every month, to spend whatever I wanted to use my 300 minutes in phone calls, plus whatever minutes I needed to on the email. That whatever it was that I could do, I did. So I would just buy up things on commissary and just leave my bin and my bag open, because that for me was my blessing. Like how I could give back to others, because people took care of me. I had great family and friends that I love very, very much, that supported me while I was inside. While working 2 jobs and stuff. And I laugh because I think about how I'm not even, but nonetheless, there's these memories, that in darkness, you can find light when you are, going through that healing journey. And for me, I had made a conscious decision that I was not going to become my environment, right? That
time wasn't going to do you.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't taking a shower at the same shower every day. Like people did that, right? Like, this is my shower, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. I didn't do that purposely, because I'm not trying to be comfortable. I'm not trying to do certain things a certain way, because this is not my home, not even temporary, right? This is a moment in my journey, and that's all that I'm looking at it as.
Right. It doesn't define you.
At all, not even a little bit.
Okay, so we need to talk about how you took this experience, and indeed your entire life, and you come out of prison and you hit the ground running with a very clear idea of what you need to do with your life, right? That's fair?
Mm-hmm. That is very fair.
Okay, so tell us just the high points, because you're doing so much and you've done so much that we could spend another 9 hours talking about it. But what have you been doing? What are you doing now? What's important? What's most important to you now?
I'll say what's most important to me now is to provide a legacy, build a legacy, and provide a legacy for my family. Like I said, I now have 6 nieces and nephews, a goddaughter, and my mom who is left here, 3 brothers. So I have family. I have family that depends on me, that loves me. And they, because of the work that I do, I put in hard work. They deserve, whenever God deems it's my time to go, to be able to live a life of wealth. And that's the bottom line. I think that you work hard and you should be compensated for that. And for me, it is building that legacy where I am now. When I started, I was doing the work, of course, because that's what we do, right? We come out, we find our way, we navigate. I learned a tremendous amount traveling the country, learning about what was happening in this country and out in the world, really. Did my studying like I would anything, finding out what women and girls needed, whether it was in New York or New Orleans or Trinidad, figuring out where there were holes and gaps, looking at the data and seeing where we could, change that, building relationships both inside the prison and out, because in order for me to be able to do transformational work, you have to work within the prison.
What does transformational work mean?
Being able to open people's eyes and opportunities while they're presently incarcerated. And so for me, let's just use the terminology that people use, reentry, right? Reentry does not start the day you're released from prison. Because if it does, there's a whole bunch of other bullshit that you have to navigate and go through. And that anxiety in and of itself is way too much. That when you have a moment of stillness, that's the time that it is to be able to work on yourself internally so that you can externally, do and really live and realize your dreams, whatever that is for you, and do it in a way that nobody can tell you what you can and cannot achieve, right? So that's my thing.
So that's the message that you would like to impart to your sisters who are currently incarcerated.
My sisters and brothers, and I would say to you, you said before that my experiences didn't define me. And I said, no. But what I will say, I just thought about it, that experience actually refined me. It refined me. It refined me in a way of how I move in this world, how I look at people, how I ask for grace and I give grace and compassion, how I understand that no one, no matter where you're from, is better than anyone else, how it doesn't matter what paths of life that we go, that any journey can land us the same place. I remember, I think I told you even that my last flight, before I talked about that airlift, I was on a first class flight to Hawaii for my yearly, like me and my homegirls go away every year. And so Hawaii, first class was the last trip I went. The next plane I was on, I was handcuffed and shackled to a sister who had never been on a plane before. Okay. And I had to say to myself, okay, we both took 2 different roads to get to this journey, but yet we are at the same place. And so that means I am more alike you than different. And so however I saw this dynamic of people in the world, which is very much like the world sees us, those of us who've been incarcerated, it quickly allowed me to understand that was bullshit, that I had to get myself together. And I had to really understand that we are God's children. Their sin, and that's a whole nother conversation that we can or cannot get into at another time. But we all struggle with different things. We born into a world of sin is my belief system. And so therefore we are going to navigate this world in different ways. But once we ask for forgiveness and we are forgiven, we have the opportunity to change our lives and that of others, because we are here to serve. And that's the bottom line.
Okay. So in that service, first of all, what is the advice that you give to someone first going into prison? They have years ahead of them. What would you say to them?
I would say to one, don't worry, because the sisters and brothers here fighting for your liberation. So hopefully you won't do all that time any damn way, number one. Number two, I would say, take whatever time that it is that you're there in order to ground yourself and find what your purpose is, right? And whatever that may look like for you. Mine was through prayer, fasting, and meditation. Others may be through building community and communication. Others may be reading and writing. you know, but when you have a moment to be still and take away all of the noise is when you're able to truly find your purpose. And also understanding that even in my darkest day in prison was not my worst day for someone else, that there's always someone else who has it worse. And there's always something else that's more devastating. And the fact that I still could breathe, even in that place, and I still had a free mind to think and to dream and to build, that not only can I do that, like the same things God affords me, he affords everyone else. You just have to get to a place of understanding that you need to focus on what your service work is so that you can begin to give and build in that way. That is my advice to my sisters and brothers inside.
Okay. And then when they come out, when they're first coming out, what do they need to know?
Well, they can call me, the organization, if they need support and connection to resources.
Okay.
And we will do that if we
So,
don't
so
have.
tell us what your organization does.
Sure. So the Ladies of Hope Ministries, our vision, we say is epic, and epic meaning ending poverty and incarceration of women and girls. And we do that through two buckets. What we know is that we cannot end incarceration without addressing the systemic root issues of poverty. And to address those issues, we have to make sure that people have their basic human rights met. And so our direct service and sustainability work which is ran by Amber Nee. Shout out to Amber, she's super dope. That is our Hope House work, which is providing a safe housing space for women and girls. It is our Angel Food Project, shout out to Keitha, where we give out bags of donations of healthy food from places like Fairway, Whole Foods, Wegmans, and other supermarkets to families who are impacted by incarceration, so they have access to healthy food. And shout out to Arlene, who does our Pathways for Equity program, which is now in partnership with you, which we'll announce soon, but is providing access to training first, professional training and development with the organization, and then partnering with corporations to make sure that people get really great pathways to decision-making positions in corporations. Like, we're really looking at how do we define or redefine diversity and inclusion to also include those of us who have colorful past, and who have, you know, other lived experiences and not just that of Stanford and Harvard, right? Like, we can still have and contribute just as much as anyone else with that opportunity and the right training.
Yeah.
And then we do our policy and advocacy work. Wait, I'm not done, Richard. You asked me what we do. I have our policy and advocacy work, which is our Faces of Women in Prison program, which we train women on how to use their voice in order to change policy and give recommendations, but also on how to become a public speaker and get paid. That often our stories are, used for someone else to make money on. And while public speaking is a professional career and you can make a living doing that, that we train women on exactly how to do that. And then our Epic Ambassadors work is teaching women how to draft and write legislation, to pass laws themselves, and ultimately become lobbyists. That's another career pathway where you can make a lot of money and pass a lot of laws and be compensated for the work that people coin as legislative advocacy when it's actually lobbying. And then lastly, right now, we just are launching our birth workers program, a doula program, which is training women on how to be birth workers, both inside and outside the prison, and teaching them how to build their business models so that they can also work in hospitals, work alongside OBGYNs and other things. So that's LOHM. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I do. As you said, it could take 9 hours to talk about that. But I'll be launching a for-profit enterprise that's launching in September. So I will share more of that work later. Hopefully you'll invite me back so I can talk about that, Richard.
Hopefully we can get in on that. We are in fact very proud to be partnering with Topeka and her people in the to the end of helping women gain access to career paths, you know, beyond just working at McDonald's, which is no path out of poverty, that's for sure. And to taking all this exceptional talent and, you know, using it, you know, to its best end. So we're really excited about that. You are absolutely amazing. And, you know, I just, it's not easy for me to express things like that, but it's the way I feel. But I know I'm not alone with that. There are just so many people who recognize that in you. I think you really have discovered your calling. I think everything just took you to this place, and you are just using it all as fodder to help change the world. And that is a capacity that lies within you, within your heart and your soul and your mind. You uniquely can do this, and it's effing amazing, you know?
Thank you,
And
Richard. Thank you.
everybody who hears this feels this and knows this, so in those moments when you need to think, what does it all mean and what does it all add up to? In your case, it adds up to a whole lot. And I think God is very, very proud of you. When you read that passage, I think God knew what he was doing or she was doing. So that is it for another episode of The Yard. Every week we end up with just amazing people. And, I can't help but just observe that there are just some incredible people who have gone through the criminal justice system somehow or another. Talented, creative, smart, funny, caring, compassionate people. And almost inevitably, they all sort of, rather than getting out of prison and running away and never looking back, they turn around and they want to be involved.
That's right.
They want to help their brothers and sisters. They want to take what they've learned and be
That's
a
right.
resource. It's really kind of an amazing thing, that occurs. Which just goes to show, there's so much humanity and respect and love within this community, which is the way it's got to be, because no one else is going to help us if we don't help each other. And, to the extent.
Amen. And I just add, yeah, I'm sorry, Richard. I know we have like 1 second left. I just wanted to add to people to be encouraged, like, when I came home from prison, one of my great friends, thank God, Akina, shout out to you, hired me as a check-in attendant at her dance fitness studio for $10 an hour, right? The last time I made $10 an hour was when I worked for my parents when I was 15. But, at 40, here I am. Cool. I did it because, one, I'm like, okay, God wanted to keep me grounded. Wanted to keep me so that I could stay focused on the path of what God had for my life. And there may be, entry ways to new pathways for you. But if you know what it is that you are able to contribute, one thing my father, and God bless him, he left us last year, was that as long as you are contributing something that makes you invaluable, you will always be in whatever work it is that you do. And because I decided that I wanted to create something where I was invaluable to myself and also accountable to my community, I did that. So, though it seems like it's hard, it is huge sacrifice. And anybody who's on this call who's been in prison and coming home and has started their own business, it's huge sacrifice. It's not being able to talk to your family. It's not seeing your family. It's not being in a relationship. It's not all of these things. But, when you're guided with God, and you understand that your life is more than just about you, that you can contribute and have so many things and be able to be a contribution to the world in ways that you never dreamed of. And so I just wanted to also share that as kind of like food for thought for those who may be struggling in these times right now, because COVID has hit people in many ways, loss of loved ones and loss of, freedom, right? Like we can't move around, and it's reminiscent of so many things to us that just hold on to your faith and be encouraged, because, it's up from here. You can wake up, you have an opportunity to do anything that you want to do.
And you're not alone.
Never alone.
Exactly. You're not alone. Well, thank you for not being alone. Thank you for being with us rather than being alone.
In Vegas.
I knew it would be a gas having you, and you're great. And I look forward to doing stuff, with you.
Absolutely.
On the side. And I thank everybody who's listening for joining us. I think we've done like 30 of these already.
That's incredible. And kudos to you. Everybody needs to give you a round of applause. I will have to say this is one of the best conversations that I've had. And I have a whole lot of them. So thank you for this platform. Thank you for utilizing your wisdom and your brilliance and your passion and your purpose in order to build something for other people to get on. And that is critical for our work and for what it is that we are contributing. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. You are the best guest ever, obviously. So thank you all for joining us, all of our friends. Thank you, Pinky, and happy birthday. And thank you for all the comments here and all the wisdom shared and all of our friends. We will see you next week on the yard. You know, it's for an hour and a half. You know, when you're in prison, you go out on the yard and you can be a human being again. And you can laugh and you can hang out with friends and you can cry and you can just sort of be a human being once again. So thanks everybody for letting us be human beings. We'll see you next week. And Topeka, you're amazing. And thank you for changing the world.
Oh, thank you.
Good
God
night,
bless.
everybody.
Good night.